Before we get started, make sure you subscribe to this channel and click the alert notification.
Welcome to the first lecture in the Art of Winning series. And I've decided to call this series of lectures Creating Competitive Intelligence. And look, I know that might sound a bit grandiose, but what I want to do is I want to present a case for what I call a new technology. Before I do that though, what I want to do is I want to start with thanking two people who've made this series possible. And Sterling Struther began work on the project, this particular project on competitive intelligence in 2011, starting with his two works, Transforming the Practice Court and 7 On-Court Strategies. One was an online series teaching tennis players and coaches how to, well, as it says, transform the practice court and take a more considered and intelligent approach to practicing tennis. The book 7 On-Court Strategies really took from the Transforming the Practice Court online series and developed some of the key ideas. And we're going to be looking certainly at several of those 7 On-Court strategies in more detail in the forthcoming lecture series. I think the sheer power and depth of Sterling's work means we have a completely new way of looking at competitive intelligence. And I'll be using his work in each one of the lectures. The second person I want to thank is Professor John Vervaeke from the University of Toronto, and his course, Awakening from the Crisis of Meaning, inspired this series. So I've been studying that particular series for the last year, and the key concepts of his are used in this course, and I'll be as careful as possible to reference both Sterling and John Vervaeke as and when I can throughout the series. And with those two, there's my work as well. I come from both philosophical, psychology, cognitive side of study, as well as being a tennis coach. So I'm trying to move or create kind of a link and pathway and explore some ideas where we can use cognitive science and some of the concepts there in creating competitive intelligence for tennis players. I think I propose it as a new technology because I think the time has come to do that. This isn't a manifesto by any means, but what I want to do is look at this case to create a competitive intelligence and a new technology so that we can better help players, or if you're a player, we can better help you compete and really kind of give you contact and interaction with some of the new ideas that are coming, and some of the old ideas from cognitive science. So when I'm speaking with tennis players, I'm working with them. When they come to me, they normally describe these feelings of being quite anxious when they're competing. So anxiety is a very common theme. They are also describe themselves as being something got lost. Anxious, sometimes angry, the rage of the tennis player. And that's something that I'm sure some of you are quite familiar with. And interestingly, often they're seeking justice. It's very common to see players, particularly younger players, they'll say, look, they get angry and then they're seeking this sense that somehow they've been robbed of a tennis match or shouldn't have lost a point. It's unfair and that kind of thing. But I suppose the most interesting one for me in this lecture is this idea that we're lost. We don't know what to do. They come to me and they say, look, I've tried everything technical that I possibly can. We've tried this, we've tried that. But there's this sense that, well, in a match, I just don't know what to do. Now, I think I'd like to contrast this with, so when I'm working with players, and let's say we've been working with them for 6 months or so, and we're trying to address each of these problems. They actually say after a certain time, and I'm very, very careful to get their feedback, so we're in this constant contact with the player. They'll explain their experience of developing competitive intelligence. They feel a sense of clarity. We can contrast that with feeling lost. Calmness. A very common one is they describe a feeling of stability during a match. These two you'd probably be more familiar with, but I would guess you probably haven't heard much about the idea of stability, both on and off the court, and the way they look at themselves and consider the way that they play. And I think related to stability is continuity. I'm going to be saying quite a lot about continuity in competitive intelligence and how important that is. You might be more familiar with it when people say, you use words like a process. That's how I would describe it as well, but I think it's the feeling of continuity and stability that for them marks out the experience of learning about competitive intelligence. And I suppose the opposite of being lost is I don't feel lost. That, I would say, would be the aim of our new competitive intelligence. Is these clarity, calmness, stability, continuity, and a feeling of not being lost. And I do apologise. I'd like to find a better word for not being lost. Found doesn't quite do it, but I'm sure that you can bear with me with this idea of not feeling lost anymore. Look, what I want to do is take these ideas. We'll call them. I call them. They're experiences, but they're kind of embedded experiences. So they are. They're very much in the moment. You know, we're feeling this clarity, calmness, stability, continuity. But the way I would kind of join these together, and it's important to do this in competitive intelligence, I would call this part of a and John Bavacki does this very, very well in the second part of his lecture, that we have the flow state. So that these clarity, calmness, stability, continuity, not feeling lost, kind of there, and they create that flow state. So we build this up. How do we create the flow state? Would be my next question. So, how do we bring about these states into the flow state? What is it that we can do? So the question I ask is, how do we create conditions for the flow state? How do we create the conditions for clarity, calmness, stability, and continuity, and not feeling lost? What is it that we can do that? And that I would propose is the central question of creating competitive intelligence. How do we create the conditions for the flow state and bringing about these states here? How do we do that? And involved in this question, how do we keep this flow state in tennis for tennis players? How do we keep it running from match to match? Very, very important question. How do we keep that moving? What is it that we can do to really create stability and continuity between matches? Okay, it's quite common to see players and coaches say, "Oh well, yeah, I've done that. I've beaten that player, probably won't lose them again because I've learned what we need to know, then we're going to move on to the next level." Okay? And they separate and kind of truncate one stage to the next stage. But I don't think, or I would propose it doesn't quite work like that when we want to bring about these conditions in a player. There needs to be a continuity between matches, on and off the court, so in preparing for a match, and this is what our negotiating pressure course looks at in detail, the real how we go about that. So that, I'd say, is the fundamental. How do we create the conditions is the question of this course. What we can have is a nice flow state there. That's what that represents. Then we're on court. So we are looking at concepts on the court, off the court, and there is a flow between those two. What I see is a tendency, and this is something I want to kind of help overcome, or suggest ways to overcome. It's not necessarily a problem that you'll see all the time. It's more, you can see it. You can see the consequences of what I call truncation, and that's the separation of different disciplines in tennis. So let's take a couple of those. So we've got maybe movement. So quite naturally, We look at, as tennis coaches, we look at how a player moves and how we can improve movement skills. Let's say the psychological or my domain, technical, how we hit the ball, and let's say fitness. I think those four categories are something that we're all recognised as tennis coaches. But here's the problem, I think. Here's the challenge, moreover, that we need to overcome by getting into flow and developing stability and continuity. The problem is that these tend to be viewed as separate. So in a session, you can see players that, or coaches like, I need to work on my fitness, or I need to work on the technical aspect of the game. So we'll spend 20 minutes on technique, and then I need to see a psychologist, so we move off the practice court. Have we got time to see a psychologist? Yes, we have. We can meet them next Thursday. We go over and meet the psychologist over here. Then we come back to the practice court, and then, we're going to work on the movement. What I want to do is say that competitive intelligence is these are the same. Okay? So under competitive intelligence, we are developing these simultaneously, and there is not necessarily any difference. No, I'll say that again, because I want to be careful here, because look, these are important, and we do have experts in these areas. I like them, I talk to them all the time. I'd say I am one of them here, to some extent, maybe a little bit here, a little bit there and there. But what I'm saying is that we want to find an approach that doesn't distinguish in its execution, or doesn't separate these. They're constantly being separated. Okay, so what tends to happen is we get fixated on one of these as a problem. That's probably the best way of putting it. We get it's my movement that becomes a problem. Okay, or it's that, and I've got to work on that psychological aspect, and it's the lack of flow between these. We're really going to address that problem in the rest of this course. We need to be looking at this continuity and the continuity between states. Okay, what do I mean by that? I might have to go a little bit further down here. Continuity between states. So we've got the disciplines, really, they are. And we've already looked at those, so we've got movement, fitness, psycho, and techno. Lovely. There we go. So we want a continuity between those, and we want a continuity between the practice court, the match itself, and off court. So the question is there something that can unite all of this? So ultimately what we want to be doing is I want to move, I mean this theoretically, so I want to move from data psychology, cog science, and they're pretty close, at least for us right now. Philosophy, and quite importantly, the science of character. Who really talks about character anymore? That's the cognitive side, so that's the side I work on when I'm not on the tennis court. That's what I've been studying for a lot of my professional life. What I want to do is move these concepts to the challenges of competitive tennis. So, in a nutshell, that's what this course is. It's the move from here to here. What can we bring? This isn't what I would call a closed system. This isn't a, look, here's my course. Here it is. Do X, Y, Z. That highly prescriptive way. Here's the manual. Follow it A to B. This is not a closed system. Okay? Very much the reverse. I want to encourage, when we're looking at this side, how do we develop this competitive intelligence? Call it CI here. When we're doing that, we've got to have an open-ended scientific analysis. That's why the data is so important. It needs to be done continually, day to day. This needs to be in contact with this. And it needs to be done not in a what we would call a confirmation bias kind of way, which does happen all the time. You hear this term confirmation bias thrown around quite a lot these days, but it really does. What happens on the tennis court when we're trying to develop a player, we tend to think, oh, that works, and we find instances all the time of it working, and don't look beyond that. And we have our own theories. I'm not saying that those theories don't work or they don't apply, but we are always in danger of losing this open-ended contact, continual contact with scientific development of a player. Okay, that's a constant threat that we become attached too much to this idea of just the technical improvement, or he needs to do this, he needs to do A in order to get to B, in order to get to C, and we're doing it this way in a very linear way. So here's a phrase. So without the flow, you cannot grow. I'm sorry if that sounds a little trite, but we are doing that. So the flow and continuity will lead to growth. So what we're doing is we're constantly looking at different dimensions in tennis, so that we can grow it. Here we go. We expand the dimension, looking at it scientifically, day to day. We're in constant contact with data, with the player, looking beyond just technical, maybe movement adjustments, seeing them as part of a whole, and we start to grow. Another key component, which is always overlooked, is that you need a community to do this. Right? We need to be in contact with others, and I mean that not in that it would be nice to be part of a community, because it is nice to be part of a community. I'm not getting at that. What I mean is necessary to be part of a community. Right? We cannot do this on our own. Even the relationship with your players, there's someone else involved. So this is not just simply a cogito ergo sum exercise. this is one where we're looking at growth, and that means we're constantly in contact with other people developing the same ideas. That's extreme. If that doesn't occur, then I'm gonna fail in this project, I'm afraid. So yeah, as I say, we're looking at this daily, weekly, monthly, and as I say, it's open-ended. We're constantly revisiting our work, what we've done. We've been doing lots of work on momentum. That's changing. It's not changing so much that it's unstable and we don't know where we are with the momentum theory. It's still grounded and embedded as a theory, but we make those adjustments continually because basically we're studying in that open-ended way. So in this course, what I want to examine is what are the constraints to flow. Why the responses we have don't necessarily work, and what a new competitive intelligence should be doing. In the next video, we're going to look at what a psychotechnology is and what it tries to address. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.